The Liebherr LTM 1050 is one of the smaller Liebherr mobile cranes, and this one can lift a maximum of 50 tons. This version of the model comes in the colours of the Belgian heavy lifting specialist Sarens, and it's in a Sarens branded box. The model's packed inside expanded polystyrene trays, and in the top of the top tray there's a few parts which are counterweight pieces and a load for the hook. The trays are factory sealed, and when you split the tape you can then lift off the top piece. The crane is very well packed with polythene and other packaging materials which all protect it very well. And the other parts include the Lattice Fly Jib and a bag of small parts that have to be fitted. There are no instructions for the model, and there's no information about the real crane either. The model is already reeved with its hook when it comes out of the box, so the only parts to fit to get the model in road going formation are the pieces of the counterweight, and you can stick one piece at the back and then the other three pieces just fit together, and when you've assembled those you can stow them on the deck ahead of the crane. By loading the counterweight at the front, it produces a more even weight distribution on the three axles of the crane, and means it complies with any axle weight limits that might apply when the crane's being driven along the road. For the road going mode, the only other part to fit is the Lattice Fly Jib, and that just rests on hangers that are fitted to the side of the boom. After a little bit of fiddling about, it rests in position nicely. The detail on the chassis of this crane is really very good, with excellent suspension and transmission. And it's worth an even closer look so you can see some of the drive shafts and cabling. The wheels are very good, the rubber tyres are perhaps slightly shiny, but the tread pattern looks realistic. The driving cab looks impressive, there's some good detailing, and there's a number plate and a fleet number. An effort has also been made to detail the inside of the cab, and there are graphics on the console. Behind the cab there's some very good detailing of the carrier deck surface, and there's some excellent mesh grills. Towards the back there are rubber flaps at the top of the wheel arches and some really small graphics which make the model look real. The outriggers are also high detail with smooth-sided cylinders, and plastic spreader plates enhance the look. The crane body has many authentic looking details, including hydraulic hoses and more tiny graphics. And inside the cab the Liebherr name is printed on the seat back. The counterweight pieces look nice enough, and one of them has the Liebherr name on it. There's some interesting detail at the boom head, the pulleys are metal and there's a realistic tie-off point. It's also good that the Sarens name is printed on every boom section, and the hook is a nice metal piece. The fly jib is also metal, with the lattice sections looking pretty convincing. Driving the crane out on the test track is fine, and all the wheels roll well in a straight line. And each axle also has independent steering, so crab steering can be replicated, and the range of movement on the axles is good enough to allow realistic steering. As usual, to set the crane up, the first thing to do is to extend the outriggers. The pads have the neat system where they can be offset when they're under the crane during travelling, or centralised when they carry a load, and pins are supplied to lock the pads in position, but they were too large on the review model. However, lowering the pads is really nice because when you unwind them you get a nice smooth cylinder instead of a screw thread, and plastic spreader plates help spread the load. The hook can then be unhitched and the boom raised a little, and then that allows the crane to be turned slightly, and at that point we can then fix the counterweight onto the rear of the crane. Normally the crane would swivel right round itself to pick up the counterweight, but in the 150 scale world you have to do things a bit simpler, and that means using your fingers. The counterweight sections have push-fit plastic connectors, so you just offer up the counterweight to the rear and then you can kind of push it and clip it into place. The main boom cylinder doesn't have a great deal of stiffness, and that means that under load the boom is likely to fold down of its own accord. So to get around that, WSI provide pins which can go into the boom cylinder, but it's not attractive. Raising the telescopic boom is the usual mechanism for these type of models. You can just lift out the boom sections one at a time, and they have a spring-loaded pin which clips into place when the full extension is achieved. This system is efficient and it works well, and when you want to close the boom up you just need to push that little locking pin in, and then you can fold up the boom sections and close the whole crane up. A neat accessory that WSI supply with the crane is a load block. It's got Liebherr written on it, and you just put that on the end of the hook, and that provides quite a bit of tension, which allows the lines on the hook to be kept nice and taut. Other options for displaying the model are provided by the fly jib, and one option is to take the end off and just have a small erection jib. It's held in place by some very stiff clips, but here's a view of what it looks like on another of these models. In terms of the more normal display options, there's no pulley at the end of the Lattice Fly Jib, so really the only way you can use this fly jib is to open out the folding section and then pin that into place and attach it as a full-length fly jib. Once you've opened it up, you can then fit it to the end of the boom and it just slots into place, and if you line up the eyes on the fly jib with those on the boom, you can then slot in a couple of big steel pins that just fit in and lock the whole thing together. There's only one hoist winch on the model, so you need to move the hook to the top of the fly jib, and to do that you need to unpin the tie-off point from the top of the boom head, and then do the same with the hoist cut-off chain. The hoist rope can then be taken up over the fly jib and tied onto the hook. Only one hook is supplied with the model. It has two pulleys and it's not really the best type of hook to use from the fly jib, but you can still use it because you can just tie the thread over to the end and try and make it look as though it just hangs correctly from the single rope. Once the knot's been tied, you can just snip the end off to try and make it look a little bit neater. You can then add back the hoist cut-off chain to the top of the fly jib. The pin is too loose to fit in the end, so I've used a bit of plastic putty here to make it stay in place, and then you just hook it back onto the rope. Once the crane is rigged, you can play crane driver and use the key in the winch to raise and lower the hook. There are a couple of other features to look at. The crane cab has a retractable platform for access for the driver, and the cab is also able to be tilted to give the driver a more comfortable time when he's looking up working at height. Another feature is that the ladder under the driving cab is removable and can be posed elsewhere on the model. This is another excellent crane model by WSI. There are plenty of interesting features and it is very highly detailed. A particularly nice aspect of this model is the Sarens colour scheme and the intricate graphics, which make it an outstanding model.